presented a bill today that you authored. You presented a copy of the law now, but it's a bill you authored. Why was this so important, and how surprising was it, the fact that you had to do it?
Well, it's a great honor to be with heroes of mine like Victor Avila and other law enforcement officials that serve us so bravely, who frankly we can't say thank you enough. In his case, he was grievously injured, along with his partner, Jaime Zapata, who had actually lost his life in Mexico, working for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, while the cartels that committed that violent act were originally convicted, extradited and convicted here because of a loophole in federal law. It actually was reversed, and so this bill was designed to correct that wrong and right that injustice. And so we were able to honor Victor and also the memory of Jaime Zapata, but I think I would say also, Jack, also their families who serve.
How surprising was it, though, for you that, in fact, that there was this loophole in federal law?
I was shocked. I was shocked. I just assumed that all of our law enforcement officials, no matter where they serve around the world, are similarly protected. But you know, for example, when our military is overseas, there usually is a status of forces agreement that protects them, but not so for law enforcement officers. And so that's why this law was important.
And unfortunately, we had a local law enforcement officer who was gunned down just Friday.
Yeah.
Your reaction when you heard?
Well, it's tragic, and but we also need to demonstrate our commitment, I think, as communities, to stand with our law enforcement officials and their family and to deter these sorts of acts. I think, unfortunately, when people send this message that we don't respect and honor law enforcement and the sacrifices they and their families make, sometimes I think it causes some sick individuals to feel like, well, maybe I can get away with this. And we should send a strong and consistent message that no, you can't, and we will prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law.
And so I wanted to ask you the status of your bill as far as the grid here in Texas and other states, giving them grants. What's the status of that?
Well, we're still hopeful here toward the end of the year, when hopefully a lot of the legislation that's still pending comes together. We can add that to other provisions of legislation, for example, omnibus appropriation bill. So we haven't given up this year. We're going to keep after it. Of course, the Texas legislature has taken big strides to deal with this vulnerability of our grid to cold weather, and a lot of money being appropriated to weatherize that grid. I'm concerned not only about the vulnerability to weather, but also cyber attacks, we've experienced what happens when we have a blackout because of a lack of electricity, and that could be from weather or cyber attacks. So I'm optimistic we'll get the bill with Eddie Bernice Johnson passed so that those grants can come through, but we shouldn't just stop there, and we need to remain ever vigilant against the threat of increasing cyber attacks.
As you know, the U.S. Supreme Court, they heard the Texas case, they heard the Mississippi case. Now we're waiting to see what happens.
Right.
Where are you specifically, though, on the Texas Heartbeat Act and the mechanism, the enforcement through civil lawsuits? Is that something that you're comfortable with?
Well, I think the Dobbs case, which the Supreme Court heard last week, I think is a 15 weeks gestation case. That actually is pretty consistent. The availability of abortion up to 15 weeks is pretty consistent with a global consensus of where protection of the unborn child is important, as well as the rights of the mother can be vindicated as well. But I think the Roe versus Wade is, is untenable. Even Harry Blackmun, who wrote the opinion, said that drawing the line at viability was an arbitrary line. And so I think it's appropriate that the Supreme Court revisit that. I don't expect them to actually grant the writ and consider the Texas case. I think what will happen is the Dobbs case will be decided, and then the Supreme Court will send all of these pending cases, including the Texas case, back to the district court and to make further rulings consistent with the standard that the Supreme Court writes in the Dobbs case. So I think if the idea was to get the Supreme Court's attention and to raise the viability of Roe versus Wade and Casey, that was successful. It definitely got the Supreme Court's attention, but I don't expect there to be an independent ruling on the Texas case.
A couple of other issues. Where are you on the Biden administration's rule requiring vaccines, the COVID-19 vaccine? I know the courts have made some rulings.
Right. Well, I'm a firm believer in vaccination. I've been vaccinated 3 times, including the booster, and I would encourage everybody to get a vaccination. But there's another question. It's not about public health. It's about the power and authority of the president under the Constitution. I see nothing in the Constitution that would permit the president to order private employers to mandate the vaccination and to penalize them if they don't follow through. And the question I have is, if the president has that sort of authority under the Constitution, where does that lead? What's the next order or act of the president? And so I'm with the courts that have considered the case so far. I believe it is unconstitutional. Again, I differentiate the constitutional case from the public health benefits of the vaccination. I would encourage everybody to get vaccinated. That's your best protection against COVID-19, including other variants.
We're coming up on a very big political year, 2022, and so I'm wondering, are you making any endorsements in the governor's race, lieutenant governor, attorney general?
Well, I've been in politics in Texas for a while. I have many good personal friends, including Governor Abbott and the lieutenant governor. I'm probably going to stop there when it comes to endorsements. I believe the primary process is actually very good. Having been in a primary before, it's not something you necessarily would invite, but it makes you stronger, it makes you a better candidate, it hones your game for the general election. So I'm actually optimistic about our chances both in Texas and across the country in 2022.
So is that a yes, you're endorsing Governor Abbott?
I've already endorsed Governor Abbott and then the lieutenant governor, but I'm going to hold it there.
You're going to stay out of the AG race? I think
I'm of course very interested in the AG race because having served as Attorney General, but I think the greater part of wisdom is to let the primary voters decide that.
Senator Cornyn, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jack.
Appreciate it.